Welcome to the Run Through the Jungle episode. This your boy Justin Lacey here. I'm rolling solo today, but I won't be solo for long because I got my boy Jake Liscow. He's coming in today to join me for a very special exclusive interview. Jake Liscow is from the Locked On Bengals podcast, so he's going to be joining us hopefully in about like 15 minutes. But in the meantime, you got me today. How you guys doing today? Feel free to please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that way you'll know when we go live. We're going live every Wednesday for 8:05 p.m. That's Eastern Standard Time. So please ding that notification bell, I should say. So that way you'll know when we're available. You know what I mean? Whether if it's me, like you're getting me today, whether if you're getting our full crew, like Brandon Harriet, Tim Lyons, myself, you got our boy Chase Younts. That's what the Cut to the Chase podcast. You will know when we going live today. But first and foremost, I got to start this show by just saying, like, man, you know who's been in the news lately, right? Come on, I think it's all been pretty much obvious that Joe Burrow been making some headlines across all of NFL Twitter lately. So, um, I'm not going to take this episode to spend a lot of time about talking about like the Joe Burrow comments that he made when he appeared on the Pardon My Take episode. It was very refreshing to watch. If you hadn't got a chance to watch, especially if you're a diehard Bengals fan and you haven't checked it out, please check out his most recent interview with Pardon My Take. It shouldn't be that hard to find. Pardon My Take is a very national branded show that just feature a bunch of guys just chilling, having a good time, man, and just having a normal conversation. And that's the way I took that interview, is that it was a great conversation, and Joe Burrow just happened to be a part of it for that particular episode. And he made a lot of comments, man, and it was some great comments, great content as well too. And while I was listening to that episode, the whole time, I just kept telling myself, somebody is going to make so much content off of this interview alone. And look what happened. Now you got all of these articles that's coming out about Joe Burrow's comments about the 18 game season, when all he was doing was pretty much just asking a question: how would he go about the 18 game season? You know that's coming down the pipe. But yet we have, I'm not even going to mention his name, somebody in the national landscape wanted to criticize, a former backup quarterback wants to criticize Joe Burrow, saying that that's players will hate him for saying stuff like that. No, all he was doing was just simply answering a question. It shouldn't be that complicated. All in all, I'm just going to just say this. Thank you, Joe. I'm going to say that close to the mic. Thank you, Joe. This has been a boring offseason, nonetheless. I can't tell you how exhausted I was just trying to scrape and find content and stuff. It was just tough to watch, man. Like I just didn't know what to do. But this week was been a very it was like a treat for us as Bengals fans. You know, we're not only that he put out that interview that he did with Part My Take, but we even had the reaction of everybody from the public, the national media, other fans, our own fans that just couldn't wait to grab and create content from it. And I'm here for it all. And now it's starting to have these roaring debates and stuff like that. And I don't know, it just, I'm here for it in one way, but I'm also just like kind of exhausted in another way. I got to shout out my boy Austin R. He's always joining us, whether if it's me by myself or if it's someone else or if it's our whole team. So who they Austin's are, man. Thank you so much for constantly being a loyal listener to the Run Through the Jungle episode. So got to shout you out there, my brother. And if you're new to the channel, if you're new to the episode, again, please like and comment and subscribe to the show. Like I said, today is going to feature a wonderful guest, a voice of the Locked On Bengals podcast, Jake Liscow. Like I said, he should be joining me relatively about 10 minutes or so. So we got some time. So I do want to bring this up because I feel like as a Bengals fan, I find myself once again having to defend Joe Burrow. More specifically, after this interview, I'm seeing a lot of us just kind of having to defend Joe Burrow again. When the reality is Bengals fans, like, we don't really have to do this. This is the situation of the offseason where he's going to get questioned. And the reason why he's going to get questioned is because 2 out of the 4 seasons that he started his NFL career ended in an injury. That's the headline that surrounds Joe Burrow right now. Is it unfortunate? Absolutely. Is it unfair? Absolutely. Especially with the product that he's put out there on the field, going to the Super Bowl, going to back-to-back AFC title games, both of them on the road, winning one, losing one, whatever. But it was a close game fashion. Understanding that even before that he went down with those injuries, he was right on the cusp of hitting his stride in both of those 2 seasons, his rookie season and this last year. He was he was right on the cusp of hitting his stride, and some special football was going to happen. And it's frustrating that we have to find ourselves in this world again, defending Joe Burrow against our naysayers, against our haters. But you know what? What was very refreshing after watching, pardon my take with him being on it, is that he said he relishes it right now. He's loving the position that he's at. He's right. The number one quote that's gone mainstream is his quote about stating that how if you don't play football, people forget about you. They won't talk about you. And that he hopes to be available so that way he can get people to talk about him. Well, he'll give people something to talk about. Let me rephrase myself when I say that. That is correct. But you also know what's funny? I'm seeing so many reactions from the national shows that want to push back and say, "Oh no, we're not forgetting about you, Joe. You are mentioning MVP odds here and there. Yeah, plus 900 or plus 1300, whatever the case may be. He's not the overwhelming favorite. Yeah, you mentioned of Joe Burrow in terms of in passing, just like those years where the Green Bay Packers were mentioned as a perennial Super Bowl caliber team for the NFC side, just because they had Aaron Rodgers, even though they weren't really the most talked about or the most talented team all the time. But you mentioned them because, in large part, you had Aaron Rodgers. But Aaron Rodgers was not talked about all the time. Tom Brady, for a lot that people like to say about the New England Patriots during their dynastic seasons and stuff for 20 years of just pure decade of dominance, Tom Brady was not mentioned all the time as being a Super Bowl favorite. You mention him in passing because you can't not acknowledge what he's done. And even Patrick Mahomes. I am old enough to remember the recency bias that people had a couple of years ago before he even went on this back-to-back 2 straight years of winning the Super Bowl. I remember that people were so quick to move on to the next big thing. Like I'm not going to sit here and forget. Like people just they wanted to insert Josh Allen above Patrick Mahomes after the 2020 season and the 2021 season. People couldn't wait to put Josh Allen above Patrick Mahomes. People couldn't wait to put Justin Herbert above Patrick Mahomes. I know it sounds crazy now because he has 3 championships, 2 MVPs, and all that stuff, but that was actually happening. And now they've gone quiet. They've gone silent. Tim, I appreciate you for my boys for joining in on the live stream. As a Bengals fan, you are defending Joe Burrow. You are not. If you're not defending Joe Burrow, I think you meant to say that. If as a Bengals fan you are defending Joe Burrow, you are not a true Bengals fan. I'm not sure if I totally agree with that, but I do agree with your premise there of what you're trying to say. Like if you really are comfortable in your own skin, then you ain't got to worry anything at all about things that's being said about your quarterback. However, I still stand firm to believe that you still got to hold certain people accountable. You're not saying that you got to let it wear on your skin or get under your skin to anything that naysayers say or your ops say or the opponents say about your quarterback or your team in general. It ain't like you can't not let it get under your skin, but I do still believe that you got to hold people accountable for putting out misinformation. We was just on the show last week talking about that. Like, how are you going to put out something so blasphemous and so wrong? And it could be something so simple as, hey, during the Andy Dalton years, they struggled against Baltimore. No, they haven't. In fact, if you actually want to look tongue in cheek, Andy Dalton has kind of had the Ravens number for some time, just like he's had the Browns number, just like Carson Palmer's had the Ravens number over the years or some time. But yeah, there's this certain weird energy that parallels that the Bengals struggle against the Ravens like they've done against the Steelers in years past. That's not necessarily true, guys. It's not. So it is our due diligence that we have to hold people accountable because they are going to misinform everybody in their national audience because it's the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think we already know this by now. We're not a big national brand that is, I mean, we are a national brand, but we're not a big popular brand, I should say. That's like the Dallas Cowboys, like the New York Yankees. We're not there. And guess what? We're not trying to be like those teams. Those brands got their own problems that comes with it as well, too. That comes with the territory. But nonetheless, man, we're Cincinnati Bengals fans, and we're here to stay. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be here. We were here before Joe Burrow came. We're going to be here after he retires. Hopefully, most of us will be here after he retires, and that's in 10 to 15 years, like he said, on this episode of Pardon My Take. So this so far has been a pretty lengthy opening season here, but nonetheless, I'm gonna have some fun with you guys. So again, if you're new to the episode, if you're new to the show, please like and subscribe and join us in on this YouTube live while we're waiting for my guy Jake Liscow to join the show. But nonetheless, let's continue this conversation regarding our quarterbacks. Again, as I left off, we feel like that we got to defend Joe Burrow all the time, but I think you got to take it from another angle and perspective here. And this is just to try to understand where our minds were, because we were just like these haters not that long ago, guys. Remember those Big Ben years? Don't you just hate it that you just let the Steelers own you as much as you did like that? Don't you just hate that? I did. I know during the Big Ben years and watching the Steelers go year in and year out beating us. I kept trying to find everything I can to discredit Ben Roethlisberger. And you know what? Until this day, I still do everything that I can to discredit the Steelers and Big Ben's 2 Super Bowl rings. Like, he didn't win MVP because of those rings. 2 different wide receivers won Super Bowl MVPs because of those rings. He actually inherited a team that went 15-1 that year. All he had to do was just be pedestrian, not turn the ball over, not mess it up, and all this and all that. I did all of that. But the reality was Ben Roethlisberger is a future Hall of Famer, maybe even first ballot. And I'm not afraid to admit it. As much as I hated the jersey that he wore, man, he got down. I feel like that we always forget stuff like that as Bengal fans. Like, we were just there not too long ago talking bad about the team that we hated the most because we couldn't stand that they had their franchise guy. They had a future Hall of Famer at quarterback, and we thought we did with Carson Palmer, as I'm mentioning. I don't forget those days to where we all thought that Carson Palmer was our forevermore over Roethlisberger. And I also thought that we had him even when the Ravens even got Joe Flacco for that little brief period of time. Then, of course, after 2010, the trade demand happened. It is what it is. So we're not even going to worry about that. And even during the Andy Dalton years, I can't speak for everybody because I know how it was during the Dalton era. During the Andy Dalton era, it was just this divided line of you either a Dalton lover or you were a Dalton hater. Actually, for me personally, I'm like, you know what? In the beginning, I was a Dalton supporter. I was always trying to find every argument imaginable possible. I was grabbing every stat. You remember that stat that it was like an image that put that side by side graphic of Andy Dalton in his first 3 years and lined it up to Peyton Manning in his first 3 years, and they were nearly identical. And I was one of those people that kept using that exact same graphic and image as an argument to point out that Andy Dalton is a franchise quarterback. Even amongst all the hate that he was getting, he was that guy. But he was just not it. Reality eventually set in with me at some point. He was just not the guy. And while I like to believe that he'll be that he was going to get there, he just never did. He just never was. There were always signs. I just didn't pay attention to him until it was too late. But there's no question, guys, that Joe Burrow is that dude. We're seeing all these rankings coming out, their quarterback rankings. I just watched a national show. I'm all right. I'll say it. I just watched the herd, and it was guys that were filling in for Colin Coward. I just watched this show yesterday, and they did their top 10 list of top 10 quarterbacks that they will start a franchise with. No, obviously no secret. Patrick Mahomes is number one, and then after Mahomes went number one, I think Josh Allen was number two, and I was like, okay. A lot of people still think that Josh Allen is the second best quarterback in the league. I don't. I think it's still Joe Burrow. But when it went to three, I lost it. Justin Herbert was listed as his number third quarterback. And if it didn't get any worse, then he listed CJ Stroud and then Lamar Jackson at number 4 and 5. And finally, Joe Burrow at number 6. And then Caleb Williams right behind him at number 7. When I saw that, I didn't even bother to finish the rest of the show. I just changed the channel because I already knew that was going to be blasphemy. And that's where we are in this offseason. It's stuff to talk about. the guy was very knowledgeable in other things and topics. Is not going to try to, you know, crap on him or any means. But nonetheless, it was not something that I wanted to pay much attention to. So I also are saying that I think Burrow should have been the number one. Okay, as much as I want to say that too, and I feel like in due time, I think we'll look back and say, yeah, Burrow should be the best quarterback. Um, but I still got to go firmly with Mahomes. And I even said this even before Mahomes won back to back. It's because he had already had the accolades under his belt before Joe took off. But Joe was right there. It's Mahomes, then it's Burrow. That's always how I've always saw it. And nonetheless, I don't blame you if you put Lamar or maybe Josh Allen at number two before Burrow. But at the end of the day, a list is a list, and it's based off of people voters' preferences. And some people vote decidingly based off of how they view the physical traits. And then there are other elements that you put in front of. With Joe Burrow, for some reason, his physical abilities doesn't get really talked about as much. It's the way how he carries himself mentally in the mind, and also how he elevates the team. That's usually what's talked about when it comes to Joe Burrow first. But he has those insane traits too. People just don't like to pay attention to him, or they like to rank other people's traits behind above his first, and characterize those guys as better than him because of it. Why do other people keep making excuses for Justin Herbert? I don't get it. I will never get it. And quite frankly, it is what it is at this time. So, anyway, what to do is that we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, I'm going to be joined by my guy Jake Liscow from Locked On Bengals podcast. Okay, so if you're watching us on YouTube, you can just stare at my ugly face for a little bit, and then we'll be back. All right. Thank you so much for joining us again, Bengals fans. We have a very special guest today, Jake Liscow from Locked On Bengals podcast. How you doing, Jake?
I am out of sorts as I drop things and realize that I
I think
got
you are on mute.
one moment.
Uh-oh. Hold on. Okay. Jake is going through a little bit of technical issues right now, so he'll be back here in a little bit.
Test, test.
In the meantime,
You can't hear me right now?
okay, hold on one second.
Can't hear me? Okay. Sorry. Let's see what's happening.
Hold on one second.
Can you hear me now? Chat. Are you guys in the chat? Can you hear me in the chat?
Still not able to hear. Still not able to hear. Hang on one moment. Okay. So it must be something that's going on with my audio here. Hang on one quick moment. I'm gonna get that fixed right now. Okay. All right. Don't worry, Jake. Everybody else say can hear you, but for some reason
Yes, I
it's
see
me
it.
that's the problem. So I'll get it. I'll get it fastening here shortly. So
And this is why I know he can't hear me right now. This is why Locked On Bengals doesn't bring guests on live because technical issues happen.
okay. Second. All right. Let me see if we can hear me now.
Can you hear me now, sir?
I can hear you, Jake. All right. Oh boy, that made me nervous.
Got it figured out.
oh my oh my gosh. I'm glad to get that figured out. Okay, now let's try this again. Jake Liscow, welcome to Run Through the Jungle Network. It is an honor to meet you, man. We haven't got a chance to actually meet. This is our first time meeting on this live stream here. So how you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm happy to be here on a what day is it? Wednesday evening. Talk about some football. Training camp right around the corner. Just booked my flights into Cincinnati for training camp. I'll be there for a week in August. Excited for that. I haven't announced that on Locked On Bengals, so your folks know that first. Not that that's big news or anything. I'm just a podcaster, but I'm excited to come to town.
Oh, that's big news for me because I haven't met you in person yet. I think you came in town one other time that I think I saw you from afar, but I didn't get a chance to like walk up and introduce myself to you. I think it was a Thursday night game against the Jacksonville Jaguars in
Yeah.
21. All right. Yeah, I knew
I've
you
been,
were
I mean,
there.
I grew up in Cincinnati, so I have been there many times throughout my life. But in the last few years, I've been back. There's a Thursday night game where we did an event on Wednesday night downtown at the Blind Pig, where a shocking amount of people wanted to come out and see us in person. And that was pretty
Yeah.
cool. Uh, Elizabeth Blackburn and Emily Parker, who is the director of
Mhm.
communications for the Bengals, walked over to the event with us as we were walking from the hotel over to the bar because they were giving us an autographed Jamar Chase football to give away to one of our listeners. And so it was nice to get a chance to talk with them a little bit on the way over there. And then I was there last year for training camp as well. And the Bengals have been kind enough to cooperate with me and give me a little bit of media access for training camp. Um, and that's something that I am appreciative for that 1 week a year I asked for it.
Man, see, that is phenomenal. See, one day I hope to get on that exact same level as you. I've always listened to you, Jake, because as I told you before, I'm like a loyal listener to the Locked On Bengals
I
podcast.
appreciate
It's
that. Thank
it's
you.
it's one of the best podcasts out there, especially for us Bengal fans. We're trying to get our daily listen. It's usually available on your morning commutes to work, like myself. When I go to make that drive into the work in the morning, I got a nice 25-minute drive, and usually I always want to kind of start my day with the Locked On listeners. You and Jake Rapine, you guys do a wonderful job over there, and we got to touch base because it was one of my main reasons I want to reach out to you because you recently did an interview with Arif Hasan regarding like talking about Joe Burrow and his clutch gene, essentially. And before we get into that real quick, I just got to share this little bit of a tidbit in this backstory because it felt like every time that I watched Joe Burrow, even though the numbers wasn't always showing that he had the most, you know how it is, like you have the most fourth quarter comebacks and fourth quarter and overtime, game winning drives. That's the sexy stat that everybody likes to put out. That graphic on CBS, like, hey, this person have 1,000 fourth quarter game winning drives or tying drives and stuff in the fourth quarter overtime. I've always felt like that Joe Burrow always had this ability, this clutch ability, but it just wasn't truly quantified on paper. Then I saw your episode with Arif Hasan, and I was just like, thank God. Thank you, Jesus. Finally, somebody's able to kind of like throw in the data that was matching what I've been seeing. That it's that perfect combination with stats guy versus eye test guy. I feel like I finally got that combination in that episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. So please tell the listeners how you kind of came up with that episode and what it means to you to be able to have that interview with Harif.
Well, Arif is a great analyst in his own right, a great writer. He writes at wideleft.football. It's a Substack, so it's a subscription based thing. There's a little bit of political stuff there as well. So if politics aren't your thing, I suggest that you steer clear. He recently wrote a piece, for example, talking about the media's treatment of Caitlin Clark and the
Mm-hmm.
social uh, dynamics around that, which is interesting. But he and I actually have a similar background in that we were both policy debate nerds back in high school and college. And so he and I both have the same sort of uh, analytical paradigm that was established from a young age for us back when we were learning how to think and how to do data analysis or situation analysis, period, social analysis, policy analysis,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. And I was a political science undergrad, so he and I go back and have some similar foundational stuff that way. But uh, a Vikings guy primarily, of course, also on the Locked On Network, incidentally. But he's been writing pretty good content for a long time. He wrote the Draft Network expose. Essentially, he did a lot of research with what was going on behind the scenes of the Draft Network. That was one of his bigger articles with the Substack since he's gone independent. But he is really good work in general. And so I saw that he tweeted this thing about clutch quarterbacking. And then I saw the Pro Football Focus podcast had him on, and they mentioned very briefly, but Arif mentioned on that podcast that Burrow's one of the best PFF clutch graded quarterbacks. in clutch situations, meaning, 2-minute drives, end of game situations, a few other situations. I think he was looking at, I guess, okay, so the PFF grades that he was looking at were final 5 minutes of the game outside of garbage time. So eliminating, 96% win probability by models and stuff like that. So you're looking at crunch time snaps when the game is on the line. So you're not looking at how's he playing in the last 5 minutes of the game that they're winning by 14 points. And there's very little chance for the opposition to win the game. And what they found is what Arif found is that Joe Burrow is the highest graded active quarterback for Pro Football Focus grading in clutch situations with a 79.2 grade behind only Tom Brady. And Tom Brady obviously isn't active anymore. So that makes Joe Burrow the highest graded active quarterback. And one of your folks in the chat, Tim Lyons, asked, who trusts PFF? And great question. But who do you think the clutch quarterbacks in the NFL are? If you had to just guess, who do you think the good clutch quarterbacks in the NFL are? Is Tom Brady one of them? Probably. Is Patrick Mahomes one of them? Probably. Is Joe Burrow one of them? If you're a Bengals fan, there's no qualms about it. You're answering that question in the affirmative. You go down the list, the other ones that pop up here are typically good quarterbacks. Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Andrew Luck, Russell Wilson, who before the last few years of his career was a very good Super Bowl winning, Super Bowl contending quarterback. Deshaun Watson, another one who before the last few years was a very good quarterback at one point in his life. Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, and these guys are way further down the list, but you get the idea. These are good quarterbacks, right? The other thing that he found was based on this grading, you can kind of come up with what your expected comeback win rate would be. And the best expected comeback win rate in the NFL was Tom Brady when he did this analysis. Tom Brady coming in at 30% expected comeback win rate, and he eclipsed that. He was better than his expectations. This maybe speaks to his clutchness or maybe just speaks to the situation around him. Tom Brady's comeback win rate was 36.7%. Now, vastly exceeding expectations even more than Tom Brady's Patrick Mahomes, whose 43% comeback win rate vastly outpaces his play in clutch situations, which is still one of the best clutch quarterbacks in the NFL, but not to the point of 43% comeback win rate, which is crazy. Like Jimmy Garoppolo's up there too, which is a weird one. And I'm not going to try to explain it. Probably something to do with the 49ers never being carried by Jimmy Garoppolo and instead carrying Jimmy Garoppolo along for the ride. But Mahomes outpacing everybody by a lot. And Joe Burrow's comeback win rate is pretty bad, right? And this is what fans of opposing teams say in these social media arguments all the time. Well, where's Joe Burrow's comeback win rate? Only 16.7%. I mean, that's pretty bad. That's near the bottom of the league. In fact, it's 13th worst in the NFL between 2015 and 2023. So how are you going to argue that he's a clutch quarterback? Well, it turns out that there's more to winning the game than how your quarterback plays. And for people that listen to the episode, you've already lived through this. If you haven't, I apologize. But one of the things that we went through at the end of the show was essentially when the team let down Joe Burrow. Going back to Randy Bullock's Cavs moment to Tyler Boyd dropping a pass against the Texans, no matter the moment, and this is going to happen to all quarterbacks at some point, there are going to be letdowns where you've put your team in a position to win and your defense doesn't come through, or your wide receiver drops a go-ahead touchdown, or your wide receiver, even worse than that, bobbles a pass and it turns into an interception, which we've seen, unfortunately, with the Bengals. None of that is Joe Burrow's fault. Joe Burrow's doing what he should be doing to put the Bengals in a position to win the game in those situations. So you shouldn't fault him for that. And that's why it's really nice to have these external metrics that are not just a win rate and are not just a stat, because we can, as Tim Lyons in your chat says, we can remember these heartaches and these heartbreaks very clearly. But when we look at things like EPA per play, win probability added, and PFF grade in these clutch situations, last 5 minutes of the game, I think Arif said he also looked at 2-minute drives going into the half. You can also look at third down performance. Joe Burrow comes out really, really well in all of those markers. And the other thing that I think was interesting in the conversation with Arif that we could get to if you want to or not is the conversation about whether clutchness is really quantifiable and how difficult that is. from a statistical perspective, but by all the measures we have that speak to quarterback performance in clutch situations, in Arif's article anyway, and as he explained on the podcast, Joe Burrow comes out as one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in everything except win rate. And we just talked about why win rate is not solely your quarterback's responsibility.
You know what? And that's out. First of all, that was really incredible way to summarize everything about the episode that you did. And quite frankly, I was a big fan of. I had to listen to it 3 times just because I had to be I was so moved about the time. Like, hold on, I know what I'm hearing, and I know exactly what I'm getting at. How did he was able to quantify this? They able to let it mesh exactly to what we were seeing. I just couldn't quite really get it. And then I can't believe that I'm actually saying this because it took like the 3rd time of saying it. But his definition of what a clutch quarterback really is really kind of spoke a lot of volumes to me because he said that he spoke to a lot of statisticians. And it's when you really perform either at or above your normal play when it comes to conducive to high leveraging situations. That's the thing that I took the most about it because we can actually go back to it. And I'm sorry, Bengals fans, you're going to listen to a few of these heartaches, but bear with me. There are going to be some feel good moments as we go through this, okay? You mentioned the 2020 game against the Chargers, and I'm not going to go too much in depth because I don't want the spoiler listeners because I did drop a link to the episode in our chat here, so that way fans can listen to that because it's a great episode for you. But the 2020 game against the Chargers, Week 1, first start of Burrow's career, he wasn't really playing at the best level. He was a rookie. Okay, first NFL start, but he did literally throw the touchdown pass to AJ Green and for an overzealous pass interference call, and then Randy Bullock missing the actual field goal to tie the game to send it in overtime. It was just unfortunate, like you said, the way how the other team just around him just let him down in that situation. But I also have in that very same season 2 other games I want to point out. The Cleveland Browns, the second game more specifically, he threw the touchdown pass to take the lead. Unfortunately, the defense couldn't muster up any sort of pass rush or any sort of run defense to stop Baker Mayfield and company who threw 22 or 23 consecutive passes or completions. My goodness, that was a fun game to watch. I hated that we were on the losing end of it, but it was one of those situations that the defense let Joe Burrow down in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
The other one that I want to mention in 2020 was the Indianapolis Colts game. Now, he did end that game by throwing an interception. I do recall it was tough, whatever. But do you remember it was like a 4th and 8? And he threw a laser and out route pass to AJ Green to convert on 4th down. In that moment, I thought the Bengals are going to win that game, or at least get a field goal to tie, or whatever the case it may be. But it ended up not happening. Now, he did, like I say, he did do the pick. He did ultimately lost the game. But it showed me right there that he's comfortable. Like his heart rate was not heightened in any sort of way, that he understands what the situation. He feel like he's been here before and he's ready for this moment. And then obviously we went down to 2021. Yeah, we mentioned the Chargers on the second one. The 49ers, crazy because the 49ers game in 21 was one of my favorite games of that season, even though it ended in a loss. But let's go back to that Super Bowl. Now, we know how the Super Bowl ended. We all Bengals fans love to say, if Joe Burrow had half a second to block Aaron Donald, he saw Jamar Chase screeching wide open, he could have caught. We know this. But also people like to talk about is Logan Wilson's holding call that gave the
Mm-hmm.
Rams a 1st and goal and then the go-ahead touchdown. Ultimately, that ended up winning the game for them. But Jake, do you feel like would you rather put the hands in the defense to get a stop right there, or I saw less than 2 minutes, like a minute and 20 something seconds left on the clock. Joe Burrow had a couple of timeouts. I don't know about you, but I feel comfortable giving the ball in Joe Burrow's hands. And again, I thought the Rams were in trouble.
Yeah, you want to have the ball in that situation. I thought the Bengals were winning the Super Bowl. I was at the Super Bowl, and it was not a very fun place to be shortly after. Actually, you know what? I didn't enjoy being at the Super Bowl. Maybe this is a hot take. It was very stressful. Like, I'm not having a good time, man. I'm freaking out the whole game. Like, I'm just like living and dying with. And Joe Burrow didn't play great at in like large parts of that game. It was weird. He was off in ways that I don't really think he's been in any other game in his NFL career. But then they did enough to be in a position to win the game. And the way that game, the way that drive started, they get the first down, they're moving, they get to a 2nd and 1, then they don't gain another, right? 2nd and 1, and then
it was 2nd and 1, right?
And then they don't gain another yard. Like, I was sure that the Bengals were winning the Super Bowl when that drive started, when they got the ball back,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what Burrow's done. Like he's risen to the occasion in these moments throughout his career, despite the comeback win rate or whatever being what it is. Definitely the thoughts in my mind at that point were that the Bengals were going to win it. After the first down on that drive, I was very confident in that. But man, were the offensive lines for both teams just atrocious in that game. And
Right.
both quarterbacks really left something to be desired. And then sometimes you get big calls and big moments, and they went both ways in that game. But from our perspective, one of them was a little bit worse than the other.
And I don't feel like when I review that Super Bowl, I don't think of it. First of all, it wasn't like the greatest win of all time. Like that, fine. The Rams won the Super Bowl. It is what it is. But I get it. We're picking at old scabs that we thought that we can be healed from. But at the end of the day, we were really playing with house money that season. And I think that is the number one thing we still got to realize. We balled out. We had a chance to win the game and it just didn't happen. But I also feel very good about what we accomplished that season because had the Bengals would have lost that AFC Championship game in 2021, people would be talking like, "Oh, you still can't beat the Chiefs." Yeah, what you did in the regular season before that playoff game against Chiefs is going to be like, who cares? You didn't beat them when it counts. Well, the Bengals did actually beat them when it counted. And I think that was kind of like the highlighting moment of that season. But I digress. There is a game that I did want to point out too that really kind of it really kind of shared with me that I need to alter my thinking when it comes to defining what a true clutch quarterback is. More specifically, when I watched Joe Burrow. In 22, we played against the Steelers, obviously twice. Everybody knows about the Week 1 game. He threw the game-winning touchdown. McPherson's extra point gets blocked. Actually, that is mentioned in the Locked On episode, though. So, again, listeners, please listen to that episode. You're going to hear a lot of stuff. But the second game against the Steelers, now the Bengals had a nice lead throughout of it, but it was like a back and forth affair. But what I felt that was really the high pressure and the high leveraging situation because you know how the games against Pittsburgh can be. You're in Heinz Field or Acrisure Stadium, as you want to call it. Those fans are singing Renegade, acting crazy. And it usually on defense, especially when you're going against TJ Watt, who intercepted Burrow in that game, they go crazy and they force the opposition on offense to make the mistake. And then when they do make the mistake, they just win ugly, and that's how they sustain those wins. That game was symbolic of Burrow being the exact opposite of that. That Pittsburgh, we know that you think you're capable of it, but when he threw that game, basically that game-sealing touchdown pass to Samaje Perine in the flat, and he went to the end zone. I didn't care if Pittsburgh had a garbage time touchdown. Now, we knew that was the dagger. It was a moment to where if they would have gotten a 3-and-out right then and there or forced a field goal, Pittsburgh probably could have came back and tied the game, and we're probably sitting uneasy. Oh man, are we going to lose this Pittsburgh again? But it didn't happen because Joe Burrow defined that clutch gene in a different way. He already had the lead, but he extended the lead and didn't allow the opposition to come back. Do you feel like that's a fair way to characterize a clutch gene in that avenue?
Yeah, I think one of the ways that we don't do a good job of thinking about clutch is closeout drives when you're winning the game. And this is something that is often not the quarterback's job, right? Because a lot of the time, the way that you do, you bleed the clock, you're running the ball. And if you're
Mm,
running the ball and your offensive line is doing their jobs and you're gaining first downs, well, that's not really in the quarterback's hands. Where, you can think back to the second regular season victory over the Chiefs in Cincinnati, the throw to T. Higgins.
right,
That's a
right.
very clear clutch moment from Joe Burrow and T.
Absolutely.
Higgins, right? But you think about the way a previous Chiefs game ended, where the Bengals get all those penalties in the red zone and they just bleed clock forever, or the number of like 6-7 minute drives the Bengals put together in the last couple of seasons to close out
Hmm.
games. There's not a lot of thought around the I guess the dagger, the nail in the coffin, whatever it is, the touchdown that puts the game out of reach, the drive that puts the game out of reach.
Right.
And it's probably something that people that are considering and arguing about whether or not Joe Burrow is clutch or any quarterback is clutch or whatever you're discussing as far as comeback statistics should be thinking about a little bit more. And it's
Hmm.
probably a stat that would be pretty easy to come up with too. Like look for, you know, all scoring drives in the last, I don't know, 3 minutes of the game when the score is, the scoring difference is less than 8 or 8 or less. Essentially, it's a one score game now, and a team scores. A team has a scoring drive to extend that lead. Like, that shouldn't be a hard stat for someone to find. I know
It
that
shouldn't
there's
be.
a way out there to do that. Maybe the stat even exists, but like the closeout drive, that should be something that we have a stat for in addition to the comeback drive.
You know what? And it's crazy because, like, I know, Tim, you had mentioned in the chat about who trusts PFF. Well, I kind of do, you know what I mean? Because one of the great things that PFF was able to do was implore a lot of different data and sort of mesh them all together so that way you can create stats that usually is not talked about that much. And can it be outlandish at times? Sure. But at the end of the day, I tend to rely a little bit more on Pro Football Focus when it comes to, you know, when it just comes to just data stuff. Look at Bobby Slowick, Houston Texans coordinator. He's a former PFFer, I guess. There's so many things that you can do when it comes to this data and the stats, and that's why it was so refreshing to see that episode drop, because I know that this is, and again, I keep reiterating this to our listeners out there, to you, is that I know what I'm watching. I know that this is legitimate. This can legitimately be a thing. Why haven't we truly altered the thinking of when we came to talk about clutch genes, and when it comes to fourth quarter comeback? How come we haven't expanded the clutch narrative instead of be solely driven on do or die situations when it comes to a game? There's so much more out of it. And I'm, like I said, I'm here for it. And hopefully we'll see Joe Burrow finally shut up those lazy naysayers that will only watch clutch in a specific way. We know he can do it. We've seen it happen. It just hasn't happened to the high degree like you see in other people's. Because as you also mentioned in that episode, and it's very true and warranted, having good luck is a major factor in these type of things, in these type of situations. And then unfortunately, Joe Burrow hasn't been lucky enough times in these situations. We've already reviewed some of the games already to talk about it, but we feel like that I feel like that the page will turn eventually at some point, and that will start to handle itself. At the end of the day, as long as you have a great quarterback, and Joe Burrow's a great quarterback, everything will tend to work itself out. He also mentioned, Arif also mentioned about you rather have a Peyton Manning who is not great in the last 2 minutes of the ball game. You rather have that Peyton Manning overall than say Mark Sanchez, who's always great with 2 minutes. I think that was the example he had mentioned, where it always seems like he can rise to the occasion, but he's just never good the rest of the other times. Tim Tebow
Yeah.
was like that too. I thought that was pretty funny. But Jake, man, you have been very generous with your time, and I can't thank you enough for joining this episode today. Man, it's been a treat for me because, like I said, I've been listening to you guys for a long time now, and it just feels like it's just like a dream come true to have you on this show. But before I let you go, I've already sent you a little teaser because we did an episode about a month ago ranking our top 5 favorite/best Bengals teams of all time. Can I get your 5, please?
Yeah, I don't know if I have 5. Let's see if I can get to 5 teams. So obviously 21 and 22. I thought both of those teams, by the time the season ended, by the time the playoffs rolled around, were good enough to win the Super Bowl. They obviously had some injury issues those years that were
Mm-hmm.
challenging. And then I'll just go backwards. This will be more chronological probably than it will be in order, at least at first. I'll see if I can order them after that. Recency bias is a big factor there, and I'm only going to do things that I remember / was alive for. But 2015, obviously, when Andy Dalton was playing like an MVP level quarterback, and they were doing some creative stuff on offense with Hugh Jackson before he went to Cleveland. I thought that was a great team. That was a team that I thought could have made some noise in the playoffs, could have finally figured out how to win in the playoffs for Marvin Lewis. And before that, I am probably going all the way back to 2005, the Kimo von Oelhoffen year. I am one of the Bengals fans out there who, one of my most controversial takes is that, like, yeah, Carson says some stupid stuff, especially recently. I don't hold much of what Carson did against him. And, it's not ideal, obviously, but I don't like hate the guy with the fire of 10,000 burning suns or whatever that most Bengals fans do. So, that team is up there for me. And then honestly, it might be the first Marvin Lewis year for the next one, the John Kitna
03 season.
8. Well, just the first year they went 8-8, and it was like, okay,
yeah, that's 2003. Yeah,
2003. they don't suck. This is a coach that might actually like make the Bengals relevant. And that's like my earliest. I was born in 1988, so it's not like as you know, I had 15 years before that happened. But my clearest early memory of really paying attention was when they were finally good. Like before that,
Right.
yeah, Corey Dillon's records and Peter Warwick and Carl Pick. Like I
Mm-hmm.
saw these guys play, but it didn't really register with me as a young person. It was just
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, yeah, these guys are playing football, but the Bengals aren't very good. And when you're a kid, I don't know. For me, anyway, um, it was more interesting to be a fan of things that were good. My buddy across the street from me growing up was a huge Denver Broncos fan when John Elway and Terrell Davis were on those teams and stuff, and they were winning or in Super Bowls. And I wasn't a big Broncos fan, so I don't remember. I do remember that Jerry Rice was like my favorite player growing up because I wanted to be a wide
Mm-hmm.
receiver when I was a kid, and he was the
Yeah.
best wide receiver, and everybody remembers the story about him catching bricks. Um, but yeah, so my earliest like Bengals becoming a thing that I cared about moment was honestly 2003, Marvin Lewis coming along and digging them out of the hole they were in and making them an actual NFL team. And that starting the the process that gets us to where we are now of the franchise modernizing very, very slowly
Mm-hmm.
over Marvin Lewis's tenure in Cincinnati before Zach Taylor comes along. And now things are going faster, right? Like
Yeah.
Elizabeth Blackburn and her sister, who's Caroline, whose name I often forget until it comes to me. But the next generation of Blackburns are coming into the business and are increasingly involved. Their role, especially Elizabeth. You hear about Elizabeth a lot more. I think she's like the more extroverted of the sisters. But
Mm-hmm.
but her role continues to grow into like football operations stuff, not just marketing stuff, not just using her business school education and helping the Bengals with the business side of things. She's getting involved with the football side of things too, and with the analytics part of things. And so I do think that between the next generation in ownership and a younger coaching staff, we're starting to see some more frequent changes. I do worry that the wool might be being pulled over our eyes just a little bit. And Joe
Mm-hmm.
Burrow's covering some things up. I do have some concerns still about the way this team drafts, about the way this team structures contracts in terms of long-term success. But that's all secondary as long as Joe Burrow is on the team and is happy, and they can maintain that. Now they got to figure out how to pay Jamar Chase, and we're all expecting them to be able to do that. But I was also very surprised when they didn't come together with Jesse Bates. And I am a little bit surprised that it got to this point this year with T. Higgins and that nothing more productive happened last year. It sounded like it was a very
Facts.
adversarial and unproductive negotiation last year. So they've pulled off some unpleasant surprises in addition to some of the really good stuff in recent years. So, you hope you see this modernization, and we're on a huge tangent now, but the 5 teams, I guess, are 22, 21, 15, 5, and 3. All 20, all post 2000 teams for me because I don't remember anything before that.
So you actually have two. First of all, you said everything that you said. I absolutely 100% agree with. Dating back to modernizing the organization, the contract negotiations with Jesse Bates and T. Higgins. That is all facts, and we have been talking ad nauseum about this stuff on our show a lot. But nonetheless, I'm very surprised at the 03 pick. Now, just to confirm, like, is your order 21 season or 22 season? Is that the number one team?
It's probably 21, then 22, then 2005, then 2015, then 2003.
Okay, gotcha. So that's your 1 through 5. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm just comparing it to mine because I have just like you. I have the 21 team over the 22 Bengals team. I have the 15 team and the 05 team as 3 and 4, and then my number 5 team was actually the 2013 Bengals. A lot of people don't remember that team. That was
Was that
actually
the
one of
year
the
that they were playing Rex Burkhead at wide receiver in the wild card game?
no, that was actually 2014
That was
against the Colts.
14.
I
Okay.
remember that.
Okay.
The 2013 year was
Was that
they
the
had that.
Chargers?
Yes, bro,
Yeah.
that was awful stuff. They
Yeah.
had literally dominated every competition at home, and then we get to that game, and we thought we had a layup of a playoff win, and then
Yeah.
that started the narrative of Andy Dalton can't win in primetime or the playoffs. But
And
that
Marvin
whole season
Lewis
was
too
fun.
couldn't win a playoff game. But
Oh
yeah, they
no,
were
he
really good
couldn't.
that year. Undefeated at home. They beat the then San Diego Chargers in the regular season. And I
That's San Diego
remember
too.
I did a podcast actually that year going into that game, that playoff game with Kyle Posey, who I don't know who he's covering now. He might be covering the 49ers now, but at the time he was covering the Chargers. And I just remember being so convinced, like, man, the Bengals haven't lost at home this year. They had no problem with the Chargers earlier this year. Why would they have a problem now? And he was talking about, Melvin Ingram didn't play in the regular season. It turned out Melvin Ingram made a big difference in that playoff game. So he got that one right. But I was like you, very confident in that playoff game and very disappointed.
I remember our mayor also throwing a bet with their mayor.
What
Like,
is it
hey,
with these
change your
mayors, man?
delicacy.
Just shut up. Go, stop it. What are you
he
doing?
was so he was so gung ho guaranteeing that the Bengals will beat the Chargers, but we'll throw this fun little bit, and then we lost that game. I'm like, yeah, it's time for you to hang up the cleats a little
I
bit,
do
bro.
think that mayoral bets when professional sports teams have playoff games are fairly common, but I
Hmm.
think that whoever presides over the city of Cincinnati should take a break for a while, given
We
this
don't
recent
need it.
history. Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, we don't need it.
Yeah,
And that's to the fans that like to say that, oh yeah, it's Burrow hip. No, I didn't like that when the mayor. It was funny at first until the mayor got involved with that. So I'm sorry, I'm not. You're not going to hear me clamping Burrow head no more. But it looks
yeah.
like that the only difference is that I have the 2013 Bengals as my number 5 team, but you also had the '03 team. But that's very interesting. That's why I said your favorite / best team. It doesn't have to be one or the other because the
Yeah.
'03 team didn't make the playoffs. But like you said, they rose the occasion out of just the depths of
Well,
NFL Siberia.
wasn't that the year that the
I think it was
Chiefs
your
were undefeated and Chad Johnson
yes,
guaranteed the
yes,
win?
yes. It
Yeah.
was. That was
That
awesome.
that that's such a foundational moment for me in
Hmm.
in my cognizance of the Bengals and my awareness of the Bengals. Like that definitely. I feel strong. I feel good about that being on the list.
One more question regarding that. Do you feel like that the Bengals should have started Carson Palmer that year, like a lot of people do? Started Carson in
Uh,
this rookie season, that '03 season.
I don't remember what I thought at the time.
Well, at the end of the day, I think the contracts were different during when Carson was a rookie that year versus where they are now.
Yeah, he
Like
had like a
I feel like
6-year rookie deal that
yeah,
they
yeah,
they had it agreed to before the draft. There weren't predefined rookie deals essentially. Yeah, they were actually negotiating.
yeah, awesome, man. This is like I said, Jake. I greatly appreciate you for joining in on this episode. Again, you've been more than generous of your time. We gone on long rants talking about the top 5 Bengals teams, favorite Bengals teams of all time, and obviously, I'm going to say this in the words of Stephen A. Smith: the list can be fluid. Okay, things can change on a year-to-year basis.
Sure.
However, I'm feeling about a certain team because my honorable mentions was 2009 and the 2012 Bengals, but we're not going to get into those right now. But for our listeners, please follow Jake. Jake, tell them what the fans can follow you and also keep continuing hearing your stuff.
Yeah, easy enough to find me on Twitter at Jake Liscow, just my name. Very simple stuff there. And you can, of course, find the Locked On Bengals podcast anywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube. If you don't listen already, would appreciate it if you check this out. We're still on 3 days a week until next week. We're actually coming out of our little summer quote unquote break with training camp starting the following week. So we'll have all of our training camp preview and the casual, not probably this audience, but the casual fan, off-season recap kind of stuff. What actually happened this offseason? Did you know the Bengals signed Trent Brown? Like, that sort of thing. We'll be recapping some of the offseason as well, just to get ready for training camp here and getting all that set. And been doing that for 5.5 years now. Been doing the
Just
Locked
want
On
to keep
Bengals
continuing.
podcast. Been doing
That
some sort of Bengals coverage in some way, shape, or form back to when I was in high school, which probably goes back to that Chad Johnson 2003 guarantee in a big way. And that's when it all started. So, yeah, appreciate it. It was fun to chat.
awesome. Thank you so much, Jake, man. And thank you again for everybody in the live listening into the show. This has been one hell of an episode. And don't forget to also please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel and to our audio channel. So wherever you get your podcast from, you can find a Run Through the Jungle network on there. But please, I encourage you all. listen to the Locked On Bengals podcast. They already have a ton of loyal listeners already, but what's one more? All right, please do it. They're how I got started in a way of that they've inspired me to get started in this way to start the podcasting world. So once again, Jake, man, you've been a pleasure to speak with, and I thank you so much again. And hey, come back anytime.
Appreciate it, man. Sounds good.
Awesome. You take it easy now.
All right. Have a good one.